Outside of practice, how can you get better at Magicka Wizard Wars? One simple and often overlooked method is to simply adjust your interface of the game. In other words, adjust the keyboard and mouse settings in the game to make it easier to cast spells. Hey, I'm GamerGuide, and in this guide I'm going to show you how by simply adjusting those standard keys you can get better at Magicka Wizard Wars by making it a lot easier to pull off those spell combinations. Before we get started, let me show you the link here below. If you click on that and you're a new player, you'll get a 10,000 in-game crown bonus. It also gives me some cool items in the game. Or if you're just an experienced player and you want to try this on a new account, you don't want to screw up your ELO or your rating or anything, use that link as well, and I'd appreciate that. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is what you're going to need for this build. There's a couple things that are required for it, as your mouse is going to be a little different. Second thing we're going to go through is just the actual keyboard layout, and then finally I'll talk about why this is better than the default keys and the time and effort I put into just kind of looking at this and analyzing if it's going to work better or not, and my experience with it too. So let's first talk about the requirements for this. Outside of practice, like I say, you're going to need practice. You're just going to need a standard keyboard, nothing special. I mean, there's some keyboards out there that are certainly better, but I'm not going to get into that too much. And the way we're changing this is going to be within the game settings on the menu. And then finally, you're going to need a mouse that has an extra 2 buttons, and I'd recommend them on the thumb side. Now, there's some mice out there that have top side buttons that should work fine, but if you get the thumb side one, I think it's going to be a little bit faster. And there's lots of mice out there to choose from that have thumb side buttons from what I've seen recently. I'd recommend getting something like a Logitech, a Rockcore, or a Razer mouse. Those have been good in my experience. I've also tried a couple cheaper mice, and I haven't been as happy with them. The stiff buttons usually slow me down a little bit, and then a lot of times those really inexpensive mice don't have the same DPI. And what that is basically how quickly you can move your mouse around on the screen to catch people, and that will also slow you down if you don't have a fast mouse, having to pick your mouse up and re-drag it to move your character or to the pointer around the screen. It's going to slow you down. So get a good mouse, something with 2 buttons. Doesn't have to be anything too fancy. Like I said, we're going to be putting the settings in the actual menu on Magicka to change the keyboard configuration. All right, so now let's look at the actual keyboard configuration. What you're going to need to do is go up here on the top right corner and click that gear wheel. The third key bindings tab is what you're going to want. So go in there and let's take a look at how we will adjust this. As far as if you use self-cast on or off, I usually go off, but that's up to you. For halt, we're going to switch that to your middle mouse button. So second one down, go ahead and click that. Spellcasting is going to be the same, of course. Self-cast is going to change though. For one of those extra 2 mouse buttons, and select the one that's easiest to press, go ahead and do that. So for my case, it's going to be mouse button 1. For remote, I make that G, since it's going to be right off where your fingers will rest. You don't have to go all the way to P to get that done in game. Now here's going to be the bigger changes. We're going to get into our key bindings. For water, we're going to go ahead and make that E. So change that over. Life is going to become R. Shield is going to spacebar. So choose that. Cold, we're going to go with W. Lightning becomes D. Death becomes F. Earth is going to go to your other mouse button. So the one, in my case, right above it, or if you have a top side button, whatever's going to be easy to click, but not probably as clicked as often as the self-cast button. So you choose on that. And then fire is going to S. All right, now we're also going to change our magic buttons. What we're trying to do is prevent you from moving your hand as much to the number row. So for Magic 1, let's go ahead and make that A. All right, Magic 2 is going to be Q. Magic 3, make that T. And then Magic 4, I choose V. So it's easy to cast, but off the main row. So it's less of a chance you're going to make a mistake on that. All right, so that's the basic key bindings, and now we're going to go to the next section where I talk about why this is going to be better than going with just the default keys. Think about which fingers are the fastest on a keyboard. It's going to be your ring finger, middle, and index finger most likely. Pinkies, generally, you don't use that much, or they're not as fast if you do use them. In fact, a lot of experienced players I watch on Twitch who show their keyboard don't use their pinky at all, and they move their hand around. So I was thinking to myself, why even have 8 keys if some of the keys don't make sense where they are? Right now on the keyboard, default-wise, you have a couple sets of keys that are in columns that are binary. So basically, one on top cancels the one on bottom. For example, like fire and cold, they'll cancel each other. Water and lightning cancel each other, and they're over each other. And then also death and life. So those things make sense, but if they were together, it'd be easier to cast. So by taking out shield and putting that on the space bar, it separates a key you're going to use with all those other keys and puts it somewhere where it's more logical to press. Plus, you're only going to hit that E key one time. You're not going to be hitting it multiple times unless you need to cancel, and usually your thumb is really good at that. So I put that down below. The rock key goes to your mouse because you're going to need a quick finger for that, and usually your dominant hand, your thumb, is pretty fast. In fact, in my case, that's probably the fastest finger I have. So I use that to cast rocks and shields. And it's a lot more intuitive. When you start getting used to this key configuration, you'll notice, you know where the space bar is, you know which key on the mouse is going to cast that shield for you or cast up a rock, and then basically you're just choosing the flavor of wall or whatever you need on the keyboard. So it makes a lot more intuitive sense. Now, if you're an experienced player, it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to it, and you're going to end up being a little bit worse than you were with default keys because you're not used to it. So you got to put the practice in, but in the long run, it should actually be an improvement over what you've been using. And if you're a new player, just pick it up from the start, and you should have an advantage out there when you're playing Magicka Wizard Wars. Hopefully this is helpful for you. Again, check out that link below if you want to start a new account, or if you're new to the game. You get an in-game currency bonus, and it also helps me get a couple items. Also, leave a comment below if you have something for me, and subscribe if you want to see some more videos. I should have more coming to you about Magicka Wizard Wars, and also be playing a little bit on twitch.tv/gamerguide. If you like watching games being played on Twitch, you should see some of that coming from me soon. Alright guys, thanks a lot, and hope this is helpful for you too. I'll see you in game.